Hi, good morning. Now that my newly republished edition of The Dark Face of Love by Beck has arrived, I thought it'd be fun to do a recap of You without Joe's edits. I want to take a look at what's really going on without Joe's spin or narrative framing and let his actions speak for themselves to see what they have to say about his character. Spoiler, it's not good. Our story starts with Joe working as a manager at Mooney's bookstore about 6 months after he killed his last girlfriend, Candace. You see, Joe sought out Candace thinking she was a cool rocker chick that he could tame, and he managed to cage her for a little while until she cheated on him with her music producer, so Joe killed that guy, pushed him off a building. But Candace still didn't want to be with him despite pushing Elijah out of the picture, so she tried to leave him and he attacked her, tied her up, and drove her to the woods where he chased her and slammed her head on a rock before burying her body and then creating a fake Instagram to cover as if she had abruptly moved to Italy. So that's who we're starting with. That's Joe Goldberg, a violent and impulsive man who's already killed two people. He mopes around for about 6 months until a new woman walks into the bookstore and he starts characterizing to himself who she is, deciding that the bracelet she's wearing means that she wants his attention. She approaches him for help finding a book because he literally works there, and he takes the opportunity not to ask her name, but to point the finger at another man and explain that guy, the one over there, not me, that guy has been carrying around a dark thriller narrative that he really wants, but he's just been searching for something socially acceptable to cover for it, which is what Joe is doing. But this unnamed woman doesn't know that, and she agrees that it's disappointing when people aren't honest about themselves or straightforward with their intentions. I mean, his first word was guilty. His first word was guilty. That is true. That is true. She reaches for the book she wanted, and Joe stares at her boobs, thinking to himself that she wants him to, which is fucking crazy. Right from the jump, this guy sucks. As she pays for her purchase like customers of stores often do, Joe reads her name from her credit card, Beck, again assuming that she wants him to because she's paying by credit card. You know, the way a lot of people pay for a lot of things all the time every day. Yeah, Joe twists that into Beck wanting him to have her name so that he can creep on her. After she leaves and goes on with her day having checked an errand off of her list, Joe uses her name to cyberstalk Beck and find her home address.
You post about this life all the goddamn time. It's the least appealing thing about you, Beck.
Reminder, this is just some customer that he saw at work that day. The next morning, Joe stalks Beck to learn her schedule, which he doesn't do very well because he's watching her from a distance to draw his own conclusions about her and her life instead of getting to know her as a person, and Joe is not as good at reading people as he'll claim to be. Then he proceeds to show up to her house that night and watch her through her window as she has sex with her boyfriend, Benji, who is getting called out too, since he only came over to hook up with Beck despite recently cheating on her, and reassures her that he does want a serious relationship before leaving as soon as he gets what he came for. Once he leaves, Joe watches Beck masturbate through her window while he stands on the street and starts jacking off in public and fantasizing about being in Beck's apartment and hooking up with her. When he thinks that she'll be busy, he calls in a fake gas leak to her building so he can gain access to her apartment and rifle through all her belongings and read all of her messages and memorize the authors on her nightstand to prep for their next encounter. But oops, Beck comes home and Joe has to hide in the shower so that she doesn't discover that he's creeping in her home. He eavesdrops on her conversation as he secretly stands just feet away from her and follows her out to the open mic where she's meeting her friends. After Beck bombs on stage, Joe leaves early to wait for her in the subway, knowing from the last time that he followed her that she'll head home alone while her friends continue with their night. When she stumbles in and then falls on the tracks, Joe jumps into action to save her, and after Beck recognizes him as the guy from the bookstore, thinking it's just a chance encounter, she offers to split a cab home, very smartly exposing her address to the man she just met, but it's okay because he was already stalking her anyway. Joe brings up Beck's poetry that he has no reason to know about, so he can rattle off those authors that he memorized to trick Beck into believing that they have something real in common, which is especially effective after Benji's offhand misinterpretation of the title of Desperate Characters. They get to Beck's apartment where Benji is waiting for her and she thinks that she lost her phone in the subway, but Joe stole it from right in front of her.
Shit. My phone. I must have dropped it in the subway.
Oh.
He gets her email address and returns home, and the next day, Joe lures Benji to the basement of Mooney's through an exterior door that we never see again. That's not a complaint because it's the pilot episode, but it's just forever stuck in my head. Joe hits Benji in the head with a mallet and traps him in the cage until he can figure out his justification to kill him because Benji hasn't done anything kill-worthy yet. But with his competition out of the way, Joe asks Beck out for a drink when she brings him a book as a thank you for saving her life. A book? I saved your life and I get a book? The morning of their first date, Joe dances around his apartment as he gets ready to stand outside of Beck's window and stare at her as she gets ready for work. She gets a new phone and doesn't unsync her old one, so Joe monitors her communication at all times
You told your girlfriends you'd come by. I know this because I have your phone.
and follows her to a school that he doesn't attend before finally showing up to the bookstore where he visits Benji in the basement. Joe is really just searching for something to substantiate his desire for Benji to die, and as Benji tries to bargain with Joe and assesses that he isn't a killer, Joe agrees with him.
Whoever you are, you're not a killer.
Oh, how I wish I was. This would be much less complicated.
But he's already killed Candace and Elijah by this point. Joe knows that he's going to kill Benji, he's just looking for justification to fit his greater narrative. In his story with Candace, Joe is too pushy, so with Beck, he lies that he's going to let her come to him, but in reality, he's infringing on her options and rigging the choice in his favor. While Beck suspects that something is wrong when she doesn't hear back from Benji, her best friend Peach brushes off her concern until Joe and Beck are on their first date and he's tuning her out while she's talking about her writing, and they're interrupted by Peach calling Beck because now she's worried about Benji. Beck tells Joe about her missing friend who went to meet somebody and never came back, not knowing that somebody was Joe, and Joe covers for Benji's absence by getting him high and making a fake partying post. Beck moves on for the moment and has to meet with her pervy professor, which doesn't go very well, so she calls Joe, who has been watching her from the bar the whole time, to come meet up with her. So he leaves the restaurant and says he'll be there in 15 minutes and presumably just takes a walk around the block. He shows up and asks Beck about her missing friend to gauge if she's moved on from Benji yet, and knowing full well that he just killed his last girlfriend, he points out an old couple to Beck and proclaims that will be them in 30 years. First of all, there's no way he really believes that, and second, Beck responds with the enthusiasm of an "aw, that's cute,"
I love that.
not taking the comment all that seriously considering this is like their first date. Joe keeps covering his imprisonment of Benji with fake posts, and Benji starts to get under his skin, telling Joe that Beck doesn't want someone like him and she'll leave for somebody who can take her places. This makes Joe extra insecure right before he accompanies Beck to Peach's party, who immediately pulls Beck away from him, so he scopes out Peach's library before having another near kiss with Beck but getting friend-zoned for the night. As they leave the party, Joe is confronted by one of Candace's friends, Maddie, asking about her sudden split after their breakup, but Beck doesn't take notice of the obvious red flag and makes an excuse to get them away from Maddie before she reveals too much too soon. Joe stole a rare book from Peach's library and he gifts it to the neighbor kid Paco, cluing him into a hiding place in the ceiling of the bathroom and unknowingly dooming himself to later be discovered by Beck. It's actually really funny how Joe's small act of teaching Paco to hide something leads to exposing his secret later on. The next day, Joe realizes he forgot all about the man he had trapped in a cage and rushes to the basement where Benji has destroyed all of the precious books. And while Joe's cleaning up the mess, Benji barters with him, offering his worst secret, and Joe finds out that Benji had evidence of a frat hazing death and says that he's going to hold it over his head.
And he doesn't deserve it. He's right. It is enough to buy his freedom.
But Beck shows up to the bookstore with a thank you donut for Joe's encouragement to stand up to her professor, and she makes the move to lean in and kiss Joe, so he promptly heads to the basement to poison Benji to death, because he was never making it out of the cage alive. Surprise, Joe lied and Benji died. Joe enjoys indulging in a less distracted Beck until she starts asking about Candace, his last girlfriend that he killed, and he just brushes it off as thinking he was right for her, but he wasn't. He leaves Beck to make another post from Benji to push her into deciding that he's dead to her, a message that Joe receives as he's standing over Benji's dead body before reading up on how to dismember a corpse. How to cut up a chicken that he's going to apply to a human. He stalks back to the bar with her friends and overhears that she's sleeping with other guys, which I guess means he hasn't been standing outside of her window for the last few nights, so he starts that again, and he watches her in her apartment as she brings home the bartender and they fuck so hard that they break her bed. So the next day, Joe sends his child neighbor Paco to buy body disposal supplies for him while he heads to lurk outside Beck's apartment, waiting for the perfect moment to send her a text, asking if she wants to go buy furniture with him. Beck thinks that he read her mind, but oh my god, girl, look up. Look up, just look outside your window right now. Joe, who is standing right outside Beck's apartment, texts her that he'll pick her up in an hour because it takes time to leave and come back with a car. At the store, Joe drops another creeper hint when he knows the size of Beck's bed, but he covers it with another comment about New York. It's New York, isn't everyone a poet? It's New York. No one's bedroom can fit king size. Beck gets a text with Li's writing assignment and whines about how good it is before she lies back on a bed, and Joe gives her the old unremarkable people don't worry about being unremarkable spiel as he brushes the hair out of her face, which nobody does. Women don't just flip their hair and men don't push women against door frames, except Joe does, and they start making out as he almost goes down on her in public. Because hooking up with Beck is literally all he wants and all he has wanted since their first conversation.
Are you not wearing a bra? And you want me to notice? If this was a movie, I'd grab you and we'd go at it right in the stacks.
And the whole hairbrush and remarkable line are just little nice guy coins that he's trying to cash in for the grand prize. But you can't do that in a furniture store, and Beck walks off, keeping her distance until Joe gets frantic on a phone call with Ethan and has to rush back to the bookstore. Because it turns out cranking the AC to high to keep Benji's body cold knocked out the power and made the whole situation worse. But the lady beckons, and Joe relocates the corpse to the car while he helps Beck build her bed. Yeah, so Joe has stalked this woman and murdered her boyfriend, and now he's helping her replace the bed that he watched her break as he hides the dead body of the guy he killed in the trunk of his car right outside. With the bed assembled, Beck opens up about her dad, and she doesn't even actually say that he died. That's just an assumption Joe already made and therefore confirms to himself based on what she does say.
I learned two definitive things by scouring your computer. First, there are no recent pictures of your dad because he's dead.
My dad. Before he...
Right.
But before they can hook up on the new bed, Peach interrupts with her conveniently timed tummy troubles, and Beck offers for Joe to drive them to the hospital, but Peach can't stand the stench of dead body in the back seat, which is like totally valid and fair. So they get out and walk. Back at the apartments, Ron rightfully calls the cops on Joe for sending Paco to buy some crazy ass shit, but Joe convinces them that he's harmless, because that's the show. Joe knowing that he's up to no good and thinking ahead to come up with an inconspicuous cover story in case he gets caught, with bonus points for turning the cops on Ron as he heads off to dispose of Benji's body, minus the teeth, because he kept those as totally not a souvenir. While he's burning the body in a park, Beck calls Joe to come back over, having chosen him over Peach, but he's too busy covering up a murder to actually get what he supposedly wanted. He lashes out and says that she's sending mixed messages because she claimed to like him but then left to be with her best friend and hastily hangs up on her. But like, yeah, my best friend's medical emergency is more important. Sorry, guy I barely know, but my best friend matters more. Beck takes the night to turn off her phone and work on her writing for class, while Joe spirals when he calls repeatedly and it goes straight to voicemail. He's completely overreacting as he sulks about their story ending until like a couple of hours later when Beck shows up to the bookstore to try and talk to Joe about who she is and what she wants, but realizes that she knows neither of those things about Joe, so he shows her to the super special book cage in the basement. The basement where he previously imprisoned and poisoned her boyfriend, but he's cleaned it up and reset the scene to show Beck the real, not real him. He literally tells her that he'll introduce her to his friends, but he doesn't have any. He has books, and even the books aren't his friends because he never learns from them. Beck deletes her Tinder account as Peach realizes that somebody stole her Ozma of Oz book and suspects Joe, but Beck brushes it off. Ron tells Joe again to stay away from Paco, but you know he's not going to. So sorted out, Beck texts Joe to come over and break in the new bed, but he's been fantasizing about this moment for so long that he can't contain himself and disappoints in record time. The awkward silence following the 8-second sex is broken by text from Beck's dad that Joe reads in tandem on her stolen phone, drawing the wrong conclusion about the captain and thankfully leaving so Beck doesn't have to deal with him. He keeps tabs on her group chat the next day as Beck visits Peach and lies about where she's headed for the weekend, but Joe knows where she's heading and stalks her out to the motel that she's staying to attend the Dickens Festival with her father. None of this is really his business as some guy she just started seeing, but Ethan outs him to Peach, so good thing Joe already prepped a lie to explain when Beck finds him. He tells her that he attends the festival every year and then pulls this fake honesty thing where he reveals that he figured out where she would be based on an Instagram post and felt like they couldn't leave things how they were. Which is not true, he was surveilling her messages, but even if Beck recognized the creep flag of that behavior, there's no time to think it through when her undead dad shows up and she feels like she has to explain herself to Joe. I don't think she does, at least not until they're out of the situation and back home, but they go for a walk and Beck gets vulnerable explaining her dad's past overdose. And then Joe gets a whole show at dinner before overstepping and trying to direct Beck into writing about her father, which just pisses her off, so she sends him away. When her dad comes to give her money for the room, the emotional void of their relationship is exposed as Beck tries to tell her dad that she misses him and he says nothing.
And you were more than just an addict. I miss you. Whatever.
He wants her to show up and play the part of his daughter, only caring that she dressed the part and go through the motions. Beck channels her feelings into her writing and gains the praise of this Blythe person before heading over to Joe's and falling all over him as he hides away all of the clothes and underwear of hers that he stole. On one hand, it's fun to watch Joe navigate the room to secretly hide everything away, but in the context of Beck's reality, oh my god, this woman is all kissy-kissy with her stalker as he frantically hides evidence of his stalking. That's horrific. Oh my god, I hate it. They hook up and it's fine, Beck's happy with it, and the next morning she apologizes for sending him away that time before, but I think she was fine to do that. She gives him a new review in the group chat, which of course Joe is reading as she believes she's texting her friends in private, and he hopes to deter Peach's disapproval of him by breaking into her house again to return the book that he stole. Because if he returned the book that he stole, then it's okay he stole it, right? If I break into your house twice, it's okay, because it undoes the other one, right? Joe is thriving as he and Beck fall into the perfect morning routine of making her breakfast and folding her laundry in exchange for sex and more sex. But he's not so thrilled by the evening when Joe has to endure the torture of hanging with Beck's friends because the alternative is giving her space to live her life on her own, which she can't do because she could stray from his story. So Joe sticks around and judges from the sidelines until Peach asks him to appraise her Ozma of Oz book, and he plays it so cool because he's so cool and chill and not up to nothing. Except he's totally up to something when he convinces Annika to post an embarrassing picture of Peach to keep the pair out of his hair while he takes Beck on his goofy Gatsby-themed date, but it just prompts Peach to retaliate. So because Peach reacted to Annika's post, which was suggested by Joe, he decides that Peach has got to go. But he did that. He set her up for that. Beck shares the news with Peach that her professor is setting her up with an agent, genuinely recognizing her talent and ability, and Peach fakes support before trying to derail Beck's progress by diverting her to meet with her own agent friend, who is really just a total slimeball that tries to make a move on Beck, firing her up enough to tell off Peach. While Beck was busy being sabotaged by her best friend, Joe was snooping through Peach's laptop, which was full of inappropriate pictures of Beck going back years. Proof enough for Joe that Peach's obsession is competition for his own, so he starts training to take her out. But after their fight, when Beck told Peach that Joe was right, she attempts to offer herself for him with a fake overdose to manipulate Beck into staying with her. It's fucked up, but then the morning that Beck leaves Peach after staying with her for the weekend, Peach is attacked with a rock on a run by Joe. Fake suicide attempt is bad, actual attempted murder is worse. Sorry if that's a hot take. And again, it accomplishes the opposite of what Joe wanted, as Beck stays with Peach at the hospital and then brings her back to her apartment where Joe can't even lurk in the corner because Peach isn't comfortable around male energy, but it's probably just his energy because he's literally the one that attacked her. She invites a friend to her family's house in Greenwich when they go to get out of the city, and it's conveniently fine because he's not the one that tried to kill her. The whole Greenwich weekend sucks because it highlights how Peach's repressed sexuality turned into a twisted, toxic obsession with Beck where she invades her privacy and objectifies her, dressing her up like a doll to play out a desired scene, but it's a portrayal of exactly what Joe is doing, positioning him as a disapproving observer because he can recognize that it's wrong when Peach is doing it, but not him. It's literally just this scene.
Look at that. How dare she invade your privacy like that? It's perverse.
Joe lurks around the house, hallucinating Candace because he's worried about Beck cheating on him, which Candace did, and he has a massive head injury from the car accident that might have been karma for again stalking Beck out of town. Joe could have stayed home and waited for Beck's text, and she would have come around all the same. She confronts Peach over her crush and chooses to stay in New York, even turning her back on Peach to head home. But no, Joe has to kill her anyway. He gets himself caught, so luckily he can claim it was self-defense and kills Peach to frame it as a suicide, emotionally devastating Beck so much that she invites him to stay with her after the funeral. She is technically inviting him to stay, but only because she is so upset and vulnerable from the grief of losing her best friend who he killed, and she can't even call her real boyfriend because Joe killed him too. It's questionable consent-wise. The deception is significant, I dare say. I do dare say that Joe is significantly deceiving Beck with the whole secretly killing her boyfriend and best friend thing. But then Joe says of their first perfect month.
That first perfect month, we'd been to hell and back. We'd done the hard work. We were closer than ever. We were living the dream.
But they hadn't done the hard work. Let's recap their relationship. Joe stalked her, plucked her boyfriend out of the picture, turned back against her best friend, then killed that best friend framed in an emotionally excruciating way to get Beck to invite him in to exploit her grief and play out his own little sexual fantasies. After some dating disclosures in bed that Joe mentally stashes away for later, and between all of the sex, Joe and Beck play Scrabble and he offers her the word everythingship, and she hits him with another.
I love that.
Joe defines it as a meeting of the bodies, minds, and souls, but this is not that. A meeting of the bodies, maybe, but only because Beck doesn't know Joe's real body count. He lied about their shared interests and favorite authors and violated her privacy in ways that she'll never even know. Because she's dead, spoiler, he kills her, she's dead, that's their everythingship, it ends in her death. Their everythingship is really this invasive, controlling relationship that Joe's created without Beck's knowledge, casting her in his story and treating her like a doll to play out desired scenes for his own greater narrative.
When we live together, your place won't be a pigsty. And you won't eat all this frozen shit. I'll cook for you every day. I promise.
I feel like I'm hungrier than sushi.
Pizza?
Too saucy.
Thai?
We had Thai for lunch.
I'm not gonna finish these wontons. You want them?
Okay.
On the other hand, I could stop bringing you food.
As things are working out how he wants, Joe stops surveilling Beck's texts for a while, but his talk about being in a healthy place is bullshit because he has no clue that Beck is having nightmares over Peach that are so bad they keep her up all night. So she loses her job at the yoga studio, and Joe offers her a position at Mooney's like he's doing her a favor, but it's really just a way to consolidate more of her time into his life. And as Beck starts working at the bookstore and mentions that she's going to therapy, that's when Joe starts noticing things about Beck that he doesn't like, when he's forced to interact with her as a real person with baggage and flaws. But all is forgiven once she sets the candlelit scene in the bookcase and opens up about Peach in a way that validates Joe in believing that he helped Beck by taking out the trash. She mentions that her birthday is coming up and insists that she only wants to do something small, but Lynn convinces Joe to go big and throw Beck a surprise party. And this man leaves his apartment with no covering on his decorated cake. Fuck off, I'm not eating that. But neither is Beck because she went out for drinks with Dr. Nikki after therapy, which sounds pretty unethical of him as her therapist, and shows up late to the big party that she didn't want and gets in a fight with Joe. He presses her on where she was and why she didn't call and kneels on the ground to plead with her to tell him the truth, and when she scoffs because he's being too dramatic, he demands to see her phone. Beck laughs at her casual boyfriend of 2 months demanding to see her phone, but he throws it back at her what she said about her first kiss, so that's weird. It's almost like he wasn't getting to know her but just stocking up on ammo to attack her when things weren't going his way. Beck pulls the trust card and Joe yields for the moment to maintain the illusion like he believes her. She shows up the next morning with an apology donut and Joe embraces her, but as they spend the next few weeks in his apartment, the mood is overshadowed by Beck's ongoing affair with Dr. Nikki, who is basically doing the same grief-exploiting thing with Beck in her apartment this month that Joe was doing last month. But it's bad when Dr. Nikki does it, and Joe kills people who take advantage of his girlfriend, so he follows Beck when he thinks that she's meeting with Dr. Nikki to be sure, but then he shoots himself in the foot by sending her a text, tipping her off with his timely suspicion, and she catches him following her and breaks things off. She really only bought herself some time because Joe's reaction to Beck originally ignoring his text is redirecting his anger at her. She has now made the choice to continue cheating, and Joe thinks about how he trusted her.
Is there even a punishment that fits the crime of lying, of manipulating, breaking someone's heart?
This is episode 7.
You are not a knight. This is not some romantic fantasy. This is reality. We accept our losses. We move the fuck on.
He already wants to kill her, but she didn't give him any proof that she's cheating, so he pivots to visit Dr. Nikki. After their 48-minute session, Joe breaks back into Dr. Nikki's office to listen to Beck's private therapy sessions, which convince him that she wasn't having an affair, which we know that she was, so maybe he's not that smart.
But I'm good at catching bad people red-handed.
That doesn't sound like an illicit affair. That sounds like a messed up girl in a crisis, and a pretty decent therapist she's lucky to have.
I know you got the messages. Please, just meet with me and hear me out.
And present him with the opportunity to go along with her needing space to heal, and if you love me, you'll see that storyline. So Joe revises his methods and smashes Beck's phone before going to her house to tell her to her face that he can't leave her alone and give her space, and then he heads back home where Karen Minty is conveniently waiting to take her place. But oh my god, in a second therapy session with Beck's therapist, as Joe has said goodbye and he's giving her space, he reflects on the end of their relationship.
I'd never felt this way before, where you love the bad things about someone as much as the good, maybe even a little more.
Okay, so by bad things, Joe means Benji and Peach and how he got to kill them, and if he loves that more than the good of saving Beck, then it kind of sounds like he just likes killing people, doesn't it? Almost like he's carrying around this desire for some dark thriller violence while trying to cover it with a socially acceptable love and romance story. Conspiracy, conspiracy. Sometimes when Joe says stuff about other people, he's actually revealing stuff about himself. Whoa. Joe is so dedicated to leaving Beck alone that he waits until Karen Minty leaves the room to check Beck's Instagram. A figment of Candace appears to ask Joe,
"Are you gonna leave Beck alone? Or will she end up like me?"
because remember, he killed her. She tried to leave him and he wouldn't let her go, continuing to post in her name to cover for his crime. Joe and Karen date for some time, and it's like he said in the last episode, he's just waiting out the grief period, whatever that looks like. It turns out that looked like giving Beck space, aka only watching her from afar while simultaneously starting to post about the perfect woman she's been replaced with to gnaw at her insecurities and pull her back. Joe is still stalking Beck in the months when her essay goes viral and she scores herself a book deal, because checking somebody's Facebook 2 to 3 times a day, max, is still too many. Beck is mostly moving on, becoming better friends with a more on-her-level Blythe, and being encouraged in her writing until she hears about Karen Minty, and then all bets are off and she backslides in an affair with Joe. In therapy, Joe and Dr. Nikki conclude that he should focus on staying happy in his relationship and not worry about the mouse in his house, and Beck is warned against walking back into a relationship where she felt trapped. But she does anyway, and Joe cheats on Nurse Karen, who is literally taking care of a detoxing Claudia in the cage, and he lets banging Beck take priority over watching Paco because some things are just more important to Joe. When Beck shows up to Ethan and Blythe's housewarming party and faces Karen as a real person who is emotionally invested in her own relationship, Beck realizes what she's been doing with Joe is wrong and tries to break it off. So he just goes and dumps Karen, and thematically, in contrast with Beck, she actually is an independent woman who doesn't need a man, so she just packs up her things and leaves. Joe runs to Beck's house and throws a rock at her window, shattering the glass when he was trying to be romantic.
Oh, no! I'm sorry, I meant to tap it!
Because he wants to believe that he's in a movie when he's not. He insists to Beck that they have something worth fighting for and convinces her to embrace him once again. She jokes about him torching her place the next time they have a fight, and girl, I don't know if that's funny. I don't know that you joke about that. I think if you even joke about that, you might want to like introspect a little bit of like, actually, should I be dating this guy? But as Joe has happily reunited with Beck, he heads home to find his neighbors doing the same, and he's not happy with Claudia for letting Ron back into her life because Ron is bad, unlike Joe. Claudia scoffs at Joe when he tells her that she isn't alone as he just dumped Karen and drove her away, and Paco calls out Joe for always saying that he wants to help when he can't. When Beck hears Joe call Candace's name in his sleep, it confirms what Karen warned her about, so she brings it up at breakfast and Joe tries to shut it down. But he knows that it's going to be a problem and that he needs to get ahead of it, so he narratively finally fills in the audience on his double homicide now that we're acclimated to his murders. He didn't tell us at the start, because if you know, when he starts stalking Beck, that he killed two people, maybe you'll think a little differently of him, won't you? So as an unreliable narrator, he omits that information. Until later, until it's like, oh, well, you guys know that I've killed now. I killed Benji, I killed Peach, you were fine with that, so sure. I guess I'll tell you about Candace and Elijah. So he visits Dr. Nikki to figure out how to stop the dreams of Candace, and Dr. Nikki is literally pleading with Beck to meet with him right in front of Joe, but Genius Joe has no clue because he's not as good at reading people as he says that he is.
Apparently, the doc's got lady problems of his own.
Dr. Nikki tells Joe that he'll have to face his ex or she'll haunt him, and he's not wrong, but Joe is Joe.
You have some unfinished business with your ex, and you need to deal with it. If you don't deal with this, if you don't face it, it will haunt you, man.
Ah, yes, face Candace. I'd sooner slam my nuts in a door.
Beck meets with her friends and fills them in about Candace, but they brush off her concerns since the girl is in Italy and hasn't posted in a year, which kind of means you don't know that she's in Italy. So Beck suggests that she could secretly still be here, but her friends convince her that she's just self-sabotaging because things are going so well with Joe, which they're not. They're not. She's in an empty relationship. There's nothing there. Speaking of Joe, he fetches his Wuthering Heights first edition from his little hidey hole in the ceiling to remove his dedication to Candace and burn it as an end to their story in the place where he killed Elijah, because making a ritual of it cleanses him of his mistakes and allows him to move on with Beck. It's just that easy. Back to Beck, who creeps through Candace's Facebook until she remembers the moment with Manny Johnson and meets up with her and finds out that Candace cheated on Joe and then ghosted her friends and moved to Italy. So Beck digs deeper and finds out about Elijah's death and Candace's committed brother and waits in her apartment to confront Joe. But he was literally prepared for this, and he pulls out Candace's fake Instagram to turn the tables on Beck and claims that Candace broke his heart to make her feel guilty for being suspicious of him. So Beck apologizes and affirms that she knows Joe could never hurt anybody, and I don't know if she's ever been more wrong in her life, but she won't get the chance to outdo herself. Because she's dead. Because he kills her. Because she believes his lies and he kills her. Joe admits that he didn't follow Candace to Italy, but doesn't mention that he killed her in the woods, and he takes Beck to visit Mooney so that he can claim it's his fault that Mooney is in the state that he's in, but only specifically to prompt Beck to reassure him that it isn't his fault. As great as that all went for Joe, Beck's phone starts buzzing, and he finally figures out who is Emma Fox and confronts Dr. Nikki at gunpoint to get confirmation of Beck's cheating from his phone. Joe contemplates killing Dr. Nikki, but remembers how Beck believed that he wouldn't hurt anybody, so he returns to confront her instead, now trapped in his apartment. And then he unleashes his anger at her for cheating, holding it against her that she thought he could hurt people, which he did, and implying that she's the real monster here as his vision gets distorted, indicating that he's feeling the same violent way towards Beck as he did towards Candace. The only reason Joe doesn't attack Beck is because she's bought into his idea that she's a mess and she needs him and he's good for her, and she admits that she loves him, and that's it. That's enough for Joe to drop his anger and embrace her. I think I have whiplash from all the back and forth, and it should definitely be a red flag for Beck how quickly Joe turned on her, but it's not until she finds out from Paco about the hiding place in the ceiling and she discovers Joe's secret box. And to be fair, the realization that the man you're dating is a stalker that killed your friends would make it very, very hard to play it cool, but girl, just fucking run. Run, scream, make a scene. What do you have to lose? Your life. Your life is on the line. But no, too late. Joe stops Beck and attacks her, not making the same mistake of letting her leave like Candace, and traps her in the cage until he figures out the conclusion to their story. Episode 10 starts with a flashback of Mooney locking Joe in the cage for thinking he knows better and saying that he'll stay in the cage until he understands who Mooney is to him. And that's what Joe's doing to Beck, locking her in the cage until she understands that she's just a character serving his story. Joe says that she'll only be locked in temporarily and claims that he hasn't thought that far ahead, even though he covers Beck's disappearance with her friends. But even if he hadn't thought ahead, it's only because he refuses to acknowledge the inevitable consequences of his actions. That's not anything. As Joe has Beck caged, he returns home to find that Ron has beaten Claudia so bad she's been hospitalized, and it's almost like there's a connection between Ron's violence and Joe's, who notably blames Claudia for her own situation. Beck breaks down in the cage when Joe tries to justify killing Benji and Peach, pointing to evidence of their crimes that are arguably less severe than his, and she begs him not to hurt her. Joe says that he would never hurt somebody that he loved, and that's why it's a good thing he never actually loves anybody. It's not even a loophole, it's just the game. So Beck calls out what he did to Candace, and Joe just says, "You're not listening. You're not listening. You're not buying my story. You're not following along. You're not playing along. Time to go." Beck's refusal to believe Joe's narrative and referencing Candace as proof that she doesn't believe his cover story basically sealed the deal on her death, as Joe brings her a typewriter to act like she's in control of the narrative while trying to compel her to write for him. Joe leaves to meet with her friends and plant the story that she ghosted him after a fight when he found out that she cheated with Dr. Nikki, and they believe it, further suspecting that her therapeutic retreat cover is actually a weekend with him. So isn't it really interesting that Joe sent that text with a little clue right after he trapped Beck in the cage when he hadn't thought that far ahead? But far enough ahead to start framing Dr. Nikki for Beck's disappearance. Got it. When Joe brings Beck dinner, so gracious and romantic, she almost talks her way out of the cage to go to the bathroom, but a glance at the stairs gives her away and Joe turns his back on her. She breaks down again and Joe says that if she sees the cage as an opportunity for introspection and growth, then they have a future together. What he means is that if Beck submits to seeing things his way and plays along, then she might survive a little while longer. Joe says, "I fell in love with a writer, so maybe you should be writing," as an instruction to write or die, be what I fell in love with, or stay a prisoner in the cage.
If you want out, you'll do what I want.
And then he continues his framing of Dr. Nikki with a geotag post near his property because Joe knows that he's going to kill Beck. He's just waiting for the surge of inspiration to end their story. After breaking into Beck's apartment to remove any evidence of their relationship, Joe visits Claudia in the hospital to yell at her for getting beaten by her boyfriend and for staying in a relationship with someone who literally threatened to get her son taken away from her if she tried to leave him. Of course, Joe doesn't know what her life was actually like, even though he knew Ron was a bad guy, and now that Beck is locked away in the cage, Joe has the perfect opportunity to kill Ron as he's chasing down Paco. So Paco sees the whole thing, and Joe sends him to clean up the evidence, making him an accomplice in Ron's murder cover-up and prepping him to let Beck be killed in just a couple minutes. In the basement, Beck presents Joe with the pages of her story being stalked by Dr. Nikki, framing him for all of Joe's crimes in an effort to convince Joe that she does believe his lies. She plays him like a fiddle, leading him on like she really believes all of his bullshit of doing everything he did for her, and he falls for it. He falls for it like the delusional dummy that he is, and Joe enters the cage where Beck stabs him with the D and runs out, locking him in behind her. Beck calls him out for stalking her and violating her life and using it all as an excuse to kill people that he already resented because he's just broken and miserable. She says that she could never love Joe and tries to escape up the stairs, but the door is locked from the other side. Paco hears Beck, but when she says that Joe has killed people, he leaves her to die, having basically been groomed by Joe. Beck runs back downstairs for the keys and finds that Joe has gotten out of the cage, but is too late to unsay what she said. The cat's out of the bag, well, cage, and she's seen the man behind the curtain, and there's no putting the genie back in the bottle. So even though Beck puts up a fight, Joe strangles her to death off screen, finally directing his violence at Beck now that he's killed Ron. It's like he gains the powers of the predators he kills. Joe combines Beck's pages with her other writings and his stupid edits to pull together the Dark Face of Love manuscript that he mails to Blythe, which makes Beck posthumously famous, and Joe is just so sad that she's not here to see it. But she's not here to see it because he killed her. 4 months later, as Joe is surrounded by the Book of Beck, thinking about the days when he doesn't believe in love, he reminds himself to keep his heart open.
Every relationship teaches us hard lessons, right? That's their gift, to make us ready for the day when someone, maybe the one, walks in who could truly love us, and we could truly love them.
Right on cue, a woman walks into the bookstore and Joe starts characterizing to himself who she is, ready to start over with the new story. But oops, it's Candace, back from the dead. Sorry, Joe, it seems you have some unfinished business with your ex and you need to deal with it. If you don't face it, it will haunt you, man. Season 2! Season 2! Well, I guess it's nice to finally meet the real Joe. The story of his stalking and obsession, minus his stupid lies and the additions of his omissions. The dark, twisted truth of Joe hidden by carefully crafted nice guy disguise. I don't know why I read it like that. I don't know why I read it like that. Hey, wait, this is just the Chamber of Secrets with the Beck book cover. It literally says, Dobby cannot let Harry Potter stay here now that history is to repeat itself, now that the Chamber of Secrets is open once more.